Hey there folks, welcome to lab number 28. Today what we're going to be doing is I'm just going to be leading you through what the other projects were in the other sections of the class. Really the point of this is just so that we can see how different these projects can be. So we're going beyond that of our class right now. So I want us to remember the research question that we initially had, which was, does behaving unethically negatively affect an individual's self-perception? So keep that in mind. And now we're just going to run through each of the studies. So there's a lot of them, and I'm going to be trying to run through them relatively quickly, okay? So first things first, we're going to talk about this. This is going to be Group A from Section 1, in which case they wanted to define what moral self-licensing was to us. And moral self-licensing is when past moral behavior makes people more likely to do potentially immoral things without worrying about feeling or praising or appearing immoral. I'm sorry. Um, and additionally, they asked this question. Past moral behavior makes people more likely to engage in immoral behavior, but does it make them feel better about themselves once they engage in the moral behavior? That's a question. So from there, came up with these two hypotheses. So hypothesis one, individuals who are asked to recall previous moral behavior before engaging in unethical behavior will have a positive moral self-perception after performing said unethical behavior than individuals who engage in unethical behavior without prior recollection of previous moral behavior. Additionally, they had the next hypothesis in which individuals who engage in moral behavior immediately prior to engaging in unethical behaviors will have a more positive self-perception after performing said unethical behavior than individuals who engage in unethical behaviors without first engaging in moral behavior. So, as can be seen from their research study, they decided to kind of combine this into one study design in which they had two independent variables of recall and action, of moral or neutral in either of them, independent variable of rating of personal morality as their outcome variable. So like some people in our classes, they use online recruitment and convenience lab using Facebook ad campaign, and additionally they were compensating their participants $30 for participation and reimbursement of travel expenses for coming into the lab to perform the study. So this was a single blind experiment, which I think everybody in our class had a single blind experiment as well. And additionally, they had four groups, which were recall moral, recall neutral, action moral, and action neutral. So it looks like they wanted to give us some more information about these groups. So the moral groups, what they would do is write about a time that in the last 12 months that you voluntarily helped someone in need. Whereas in the neutral version of the recall group, they write about what you did yesterday. So as you can see, this is kind of where they just recall either something very positive that they did in the past or just something very neutral. Now, in the action group, where they actually want people to actually act in this thing, the participant will review that their bank statement for a savings account containing $1,500. Shortly after, they'll receive a call from a distressed friend who recently lost their job. Finally, the participant will choose to gift the friend $100 to help. And in the neutral version, the participant will engage in a boring day, which that sucks. This will include an oatmeal for breakfast, some light housework, and walking their dog. Which, okay, I mean, walking their dog is pretty fun to me, but that's the neutral condition for them. Um, so additionally, for their dependent variable of moral self-perception, they use the moral subscale scale score of the six-factor self-concept scale for adults ran by Stake in 1994, took an average of the items, and they use a 2 by 2 factorial design just like a lot of people in our group. And they will only use transformations if the data are not normally distributed. So we can go on to our next group in which they ask the question, can the choice of whether to behave unethically negatively impact feelings of self-esteem? And their hypotheses are participants who are instructed to steal will have a higher measured self-esteem scores than those who freely choose to steal. Okay, that's interesting. So if you're instructed to steal, okay. In hypothesis two, participants who are instructed to share will have lower measured self-esteem scores than those who freely choose to share. That's very interesting. So it's two sides of kind of the same coin, but looking at it in a different way. So oh wow, they used a very interesting multi-stage simple random sampling, in which case looks like they're just trying to get to recruit volunteers and trying to get people through different stages. Their independent variable is choice or no choice condition, whether or not they had the choice to choose to steal or choice not to steal. And their dependent variable was self-esteem, just like the hypothesis said. So this is a classic prisoner's dilemma experiment in which you would kind of put people into this interesting situation of whether they had the choice to choose to steal or not to choose to steal, or to share or not to share. And it looks like they used the between subject ANOVA design in order to do this, with their outcome variable being self-esteem. Group C had a bystander effect. So the more people present, the less likely someone will feel negatively about not reporting an incidence of cheating due to diffusion of responsibility. This one is really interesting. It's a lot different than the ones that we've had in our classes as well. So their first hypothesis is proctors who observe but do not report cheating will have lower self-esteem than those who do not report cheating. So it looks like self-esteem is their outcome variable. And hypothesis 2, proctors who are part of a team and do not report cheating will experience less negative effect on self-esteem than those proctoring alone. So I guess it's saying the effect of not reporting cheating on self-esteem and morality is mediated by number of proctors. So it seems like the more people there are, the less it's going to affect them. So for their procedure, what they do is the participants are initially told that the study concerns the effectiveness of different kinds of testing proctoring behavior, so a little bit of deception there. Participants will meet with the Confederates playing as test takers and a supervisor. So they've got Confederates who are going to be cheating on a test. Participants will act as student proctors to a small group of 4 to 6 Confederates and administer a mock aptitude test. It looks like, I'm guessing there's going to be the students are going to be cheating. And then additionally, participants will proctor alone or proctor in pairs with a Confederate, and the Confederate proctor will look out for but not report cheating. So, as we can see from their independent variables, they have a monetary incentive to report cheating or not. So I guess they will be giving money to people to report cheating versus not giving money to people cheating, and whether they're alone or not, or with other proctors. And their dependent variable is self-perceived morality from the Harder scale, which I know people in our class used as well, which is a great scale to use. Additionally, they had 2 conditions, one in which participant proctors are told that cheating is not permissible under any circumstances. And then in condition 2, participants are told that to carefully watch the test taker, paying attention to their behavior. And a Confederate will approach the participant and offer to split the money they receive if the participant does not report cheating behavior. Interesting. So you're going to use the university participant pool, 128 participants, 28 per condition. So I guess these are students that will be acting as proctors for this test. It's a 2x2 factorial design, and they'll be using an ANOVA, and they even talked about interaction effects as well. And for Group B, for the last of Section 1 here, participants will report having a negative self-esteem after engaging in immoral behavior unless a participant has found sufficient self-justification for engaging in the immoral act. And hypothesis 2 looks like it's regarding just women. Women will report having a lower self-esteem than men after engaging in an act of cheating unless they have sufficient justification for cheating. Men with sufficient self-justification while cheating will experience the smallest decrease in self-esteem, followed by women with sufficient self-justification for cheating, then men with sufficient justification. Women without sufficient justification for cheating will experience the largest decrease in self-esteem. Wow. Okay, that was a very long one and very specific. So they have a very specific hypothesis there. Very interesting. So this one looks like they will have a sample size of 152 participants after running in the power analysis, and each condition will contain 38 participants. They're going to use the MTurk, which, if you don't know what the MTurk is, this is a kind of large sampling thing that they can get workers from different industries to participate in anonymous surveys for their and they get compensated for participating in surveys. So it's a really quick way in order to get participants, and then they're also going to be using Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. So it's a really big social media presence in order to recruit participants. Either way, the independent variables are justification for cheating and gender, and dependent variables are pre and post self-esteem. So post self-esteem really being dependent variable while controlling for self-esteem. So they're going to use a 2x2 repeated measure ANOVA, and the procedures for this is that people complete an anagram task with an answer key to quote-unquote grade their work, and under these justification conditions, participants are told that they will get $1 extra for all correct answers, and then in the no justification condition, they don't receive any financial incentive. So for having correct answers. And then for the outcome variable, they're going to use the Rosenberg self-esteem measure before and after, which I believe somebody did, or they used in our group, in our class, somebody used a measure of self-esteem, but I don't think it was the Rosenberg self-esteem. All right, so we're actually switching sections, and you'll know we're switching sections when I have different slides because these were made by TAs. So in this one, it looks like they had the hypotheses were lying is a positively correlated to an individual's perception of control over a situation, and hypothesis 2, lying has a positive effect on individual self-esteem. Kind of simplistic hypotheses, really great. Just kind of figuring out what they're going for self-esteem. Yeah. And then the participants, it looks like they had 200 participants, split 100 female, 100 male, undergrad psych students from CSU. So they're going to try and have I guess it's not so much randomly sampled, but they're going to try and get exactly 100 females and males. They'll meet the confederate of same sex. Confederate will ask questions during midterms about experience at CSU. And one group will be told to lie while the control group will be told to be honest. And then additionally, the experimental group will do it again during the finals, but be told to be honest. After each interaction with the confederate, participants will take 2 surveys for the sets of agency scale and the Rosenberg self-esteem scale. So as we can see, their IV is lying, and their dependent variables changes in self-esteem and beliefs over time. They'll use a paired samples t-test to investigate this change over time. And an independent samples t-test to investigate differences in control and experimental groups. So that's really the main things with those. And then they got into group 2, in which case they talked about they had one hypothesis in which cheating negatively affects an individual's self-esteem. And their procedures were that participants completed this self-esteem inventory, receive a topic and asked to write a page and take the Cooper-Smith self-esteem inventory again. And then they had 3 conditions, it looks like: given a topic and told to write, given a topic and told an example but told not to copy, and then lastly was give a topic and example but told nothing further. So their analysis plans were that all participants will have a self-esteem score before and after writing a page. So they want to sample 200 participants from the psych undergrad research pool, again utilizing the research pool. And we can finally get to their independent variable, which is cheating, and the dependent variable, which is self-esteem change over time. So they're really just comparing the pre and the post using a dependent samples t-test. And they're only using complete cases. So group 3 for this section, they had the hypothesis that lying will have a negative impact on self-perception. In order to test that, they would have participants complete online surveys indicating their lying behavior habits, and using a self-perception questionnaire, with their independent variables being lying, combined score of the Big 5 personality and integrity and work ethic tests, interesting, and their dependent variable being personal self-concept questionnaire, which I'm not very familiar with that one, but it seems to have something to do with their self-concept, of course. And they're going to use a 1 sample t-test, and lying split into 2 groups, high or low levels of lying compared through a t-test, and they will be excluding habitual liars, so it's people who are very high levels of lying, which is interesting to me, that they would do that. So now we're going on to the 4th group of this class, of this section 3, I believe it is. So they had 2 hypotheses in which participants with higher self-esteem will have the largest decrease in self-esteem measurement after the antisocial behavior is completed. And additionally, for hypothesis 2, participants with lower self-esteem will show the least amount of change in self-esteem measurement after the antisocial behavior is complete. So they're going to be using the Rosenberg self-esteem scale. I'm sure that's probably their dependent variable, and the unethical behavior is cheating, which I'm sure is their independent variable. And using 100 students from the psych undergrad research pool who will receive course credit. So their procedure is they will complete this. Well, you can just read the procedures, but um, seems like anytime that there's cheating, cheating involves peeking, using a cell phone, or giving ask for answers. Scores lower than 15 on the scales will be considered having low self-esteem, and they'll be using a dependent samples t-test to compare changes over time. All right, so we're going to lab 4 or section 4, in which they had one hypothesis in which they would have participants who make the decision framed as moral decision in the trade-off game will score higher on the Rosenberg self-esteem scale compared to participants who did not make the perceived moral decision. So this is based off of some study in the past. And they had a sampling plan in which they would use a convenience sample and try to obtain 199 participants. I'm guessing that's to get a PowerPoint 8.0. They're going to be using a 2x2 between subjects ANOVA. So their IV number 1 is advice. IV number 2 is decision. So for advice, it's whether they're given equitable advice or efficient advice. IV number 2 is made equitable decision or an efficient decision. I'm not entirely sure what that means. What an efficient decision, I guess equitable would mean making it a decision that benefits everyone in a kind of more equal way. And efficient would be making the most efficient decision is what I guess. And then their outcome variable would be self-esteem. So group 2 from this looks like this is based on business closures, in which their hypothesis was Colorado, oh, this is interesting, is related to COVID, it seems like. So Colorado non-essential business owners will have lower self-esteem when they remained open longer after March 11, 2020, the day COVID was declared a pandemic, relative to Colorado non-essential business owners who closed earlier. So their sampling plan is their recruitment via email. They needed 81 participants to do this. And group 2, so they will be using linear multiple regression. Predictor variable is the number of days after, okay, interesting, number of days after March 11, 2020 of non-essential business closed. So they're actually using that as a predictor variable. So the longer your stay closed after March 11, 2020, you're supposed to be related to the outcome of self-esteem. So it seems like the more days after the non-essential business is closed, the lower their self-esteem will be. So it'd be a negative relation is what I'm guessing. And then they'll also be controlling for age of business, owner, income, number of employees, and gender, which is very easy to do through multiple regression. And group 3 for this project of section 4 says that those who engage in stealing behaviors will have higher levels of self-esteem compared to those who did not engage in stealing behaviors. So we expect to see a main effect of stealing status on self-esteem, essentially. And their sampling plan is they use stratified random sampling, which is something we talked about in our group, which is a quasi-experimental design, and they're expecting to get 199 participants. So group 3, stealing behavior and self-esteem. Their analysis plan, they'll use a between subjects and COVA, so they're going to have some covariates as well. Predictor number 1 is stealing status, and their outcome variable is self-esteem with these 2 measures. And their covariates are income and baseline self-esteem, so they're going to be controlling for baseline self-esteem. And then lastly, but not least, we have group 4. So their participants, their hypothesis is that participants who agree to cheat will have lower self-esteem than those who did not agree to cheat when presented with the opportunity to cheat on the exam for money. Nice. So their sampling plan is they use cluster probability sampling of n equals 200, 100 per condition for their first independent variable. So they will be using a 2x2 between subjects and COVA. So again, it's an ANOVA, but they're able to control for certain variables. Their first independent variable will be cheating, did offer to cheat or did not offer, and the cheating decision did cheat versus did not cheat. And their outcome variable will be the RSES, using covariates of self-esteem and demographics. and at certain demographics. So I know I ran through those pretty quick, but I think really the point of this is that we really want to show you that, with one research question, you can come with all sorts of study designs, all sorts of different hypotheses, dependent variables, independent variables, and the way to study one research question is vast. And that comes to kind of think about, well, what is it about our field? So what are we studying and how are we operationalizing our constructs? If there's not an agreement on one research question, how can we be so sure? Well, I think that the idea is that, people are going to study what they want to study, and we just really what we need to make sure of is that operationalized constructs are, legitimate, we have effective sample sizes, and that what the researcher is planning to study is what actually is being studied overall.